You really think people only respect money? Claire asked quietly, her fingers still wrapped around the coffee pot. Nathaniel Reed looked up from the leather check presenter in front of him and gave a cold smile. I don't think it, sweetheart. I know it. Outside, freezing rain hammered against the windows of Blackwood Steakhouse, turning downtown Chicago into a blur of silver lights and distorted reflections. Inside, everything glowed warm amber. Crystal glasses clinked softly. Jazz drifted through hidden speakers. Expensive perfume mixed with the scent of bourbon and grilled ribeye. Nathaniel sat alone near the back of the restaurant beneath a dim hanging light, his charcoal cashmere coat folded neatly beside him, his silver hair still damp from the storm. At 52, he carried the kind of face people trusted on magazine covers, but feared in boardrooms. Sharp jaw, tired blue eyes. The posture of a man used to controlling rooms without raising his voice. Claire Whitmore noticed him the moment he walked in 40 minutes earlier. Not because he looked rich. Wealthy men came through Blackwood every night. It was the silence around him that caught her attention. The exhaustion. The way he stared out the rain-covered window between bites like he was somewhere else entirely. She had seen lonely men before, but this one looked hollow. Nathaniel slowly opened the check presenter again, then frowned. He reached into his coat pocket. Nothing. Then his pants pocket. Still nothing. A pause followed. Small, deliberate, carefully performed. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled through his nose. Interesting, he muttered. Claire remained calm. Problem, sir? Nathaniel looked directly into her eyes for the first time that night. Looks like I forgot my wallet. A nearby couple glanced over immediately. The businessman at the bar smirked into his whiskey. The young host near the entrance stiffened. Nathaniel noticed every reaction. He always did. Because this was the experiment. Not the missing card. The people. The shift in tone once money disappeared from the equation. He had spent 20 years building hotels, buying companies, sitting across polished tables from people who smiled too quickly and bowed too easily. And somewhere along the way, he became obsessed with one question. Would anyone treat him with dignity if they thought he had none left to offer? Claire didn't answer right away. She simply studied him for a second longer than expected. Then she surprised him. Did you drive in this weather alone? Nathaniel blinked once. That was not the question he expected. Not can you pay? Not do you have somebody coming? Not we may need to call the manager. Her voice stayed soft. Human. Roads are getting dangerous tonight. For the first time all evening. Nathaniel Reed had no prepared response. Nathaniel leaned back slowly, studying her face beneath the warm restaurant light. Claire did not look embarrassed for him. She did not look suspicious either. That unsettled him more than anger would have. Most people changed the second money disappeared from the table. Their posture changed first. Then their eyes. Respect became calculation almost instantly. But Claire simply stood there holding the coffee pot against her dark apron, while rainwater crawled down the windows behind her like silver veins. I did drive alone, Nathaniel answered finally. Bad habit. Claire nodded once. My brother used to say storms make people think clearer. Nathaniel gave a faint dry laugh. Your brother sounds optimistic. He was a firefighter, she replied quietly. Was. The word hung there for half a second too long. Nathaniel noticed it immediately. Claire noticed that he noticed, but neither of them pushed further. At the front of the restaurant, the young host whispered something nervously to the manager. The manager glanced toward Nathaniel's table again. His expression tightened. Blackwood Steakhouse served judges, athletes, executives, old Chicago families. A customer unable to pay was not part of the atmosphere they sold. Nathaniel could almost predict what would happen next. First came polite concern, then subtle pressure, then humiliation wrapped in professional language. He had watched it happen before in diners, bars, airports, even luxury hotels he personally owned under different names. The strange thing was, every single time it still disappointed him. Claire slowly refilled his water glass. Do you remember where you might have left it? She asked. Nathaniel looked at the untouched leather chair beside him where his coat rested perfectly folded. His wallet was inside the coat pocket, less than 3 feet away. The experiment could end any time he wanted. Yet something stopped him. Maybe curiosity, maybe loneliness, or maybe it was the calmness in Claire's voice that made him want to stay inside this moment a little longer. Not sure, he replied. Long day. Claire glanced toward the rain outside. Looks like a long life. Nathaniel stared at her after that. Really stared. 41 maybe. fine lines near her eyes that only appeared when she spoke softly. No expensive jewelry. No performance. Just exhaustion carried with dignity. He was suddenly aware of how loud the restaurant felt around them. The clinking silverware. Low jazz piano. Forced laughter from the business table near the bar. Everyone performing success for each other. Then there was Claire, moving through the noise like someone who no longer needed to prove she mattered. The manager finally approached. Tall. Nervous smile. Red tie slightly crooked. Good evening, sir, he said carefully. I understand there may be an issue with payment tonight. There it was. Nathaniel almost smiled. Claire answered before he could. He left his wallet somewhere during the storm. The manager's eyes flicked toward Nathaniel's watch instantly. Even now he was assessing value. Risk. Social status. Nathaniel knew that looked too well. Well, the manager said slowly. We usually require some form of collateral until payment can be arranged. Claire's expression changed for the first time all night. Not anger. Something colder. Disappointment. He is not trying to run away, she said softly. The manager lowered his voice. Claire, please. We have policies. Nathaniel watched her carefully then because this was always the moment people folded under pressure. The moment kindness became inconvenience. But Claire surprised him again. She reached into her apron pocket, pulled out a small stack of folded cash. Tips, and placed them gently beside the check presenter. Then put it on mine tonight, she said. And suddenly, Nathaniel Reed felt something unfamiliar crawl quietly into his chest. Shame. The manager stared at the folded bills on the table as if they embarrassed him personally. Claire, you do not have to do this, he whispered. But she was already reaching for the check presenter again, calm and steady beneath the soft amber lights. Nathaniel watched her fingers carefully, small scars near her knuckles, fingertips rough from years of carrying hot plates and coffee mugs. Not delicate hands. Working hands. Real hands. Somehow that made the cash feel heavier. It is fine, Claire said quietly. Just run it under employee meal adjustment. The manager hesitated. That is almost $200. Claire gave the faintest shrug. Then I will pick up Saturday lunch shift too. Nathaniel felt his stomach tighten unexpectedly. Saturday lunch at Blackwood was brutal. Endless customers. Double sections. Noisy families from downtown shopping traffic. 8 straight hours on your feet for tips people barely remembered leaving. And she was volunteering for it. For a stranger she believed forgot his wallet in a storm. The businessman at the bar laughed under his breath. Must be nice finding free meals in this economy. Nathaniel turned slightly toward the voice. The man immediately looked away. Typical. Loud cruelty from safe distances. Claire ignored the comment completely. She slid the check presenter beneath her arm and reached for Nathaniel's untouched coffee cup instead. It is cold now, she said softly. Let me bring another one. Nathaniel frowned. Why are you being kind to me? Claire paused for half a second. The question clearly surprised her more than the missing wallet had. Because you look like someone who has not had much of it lately. The words landed harder than they should have. Nathaniel looked down at the polished table surface, suddenly aware of his own reflection in the dim light. Tired eyes. Gray at the temples. A face newspapers called powerful. Successful. Untouchable. Yet somehow this waitress had looked at him for less than an hour. And seen exhaustion underneath all of it. That unsettled him deeply. Claire disappeared toward the kitchen, weaving through crowded tables beneath hanging chandeliers, while snow-like rain rattled softly against the windows. Nathaniel sat motionless. Around him the restaurant returned to life. Glasses clinked. Steaks sizzled somewhere behind swinging kitchen doors. A couple near the fireplace argued quietly about real estate numbers. Everything moved on as if nothing important had happened. But something had. Nathaniel could feel it. For years he had tested people the same way. Restaurants. Airports. Small towns during business trips. He would remove money from the equation just long enough to watch respect disappear. And usually it did. Fast. The wealthy investor became an inconvenience. The polished gentleman became suspicious. Disposable. Yet Claire had done the opposite. She saw less value in his wallet than in whether he made it home safely through the storm. That thought sat heavily in his chest. A few minutes later she returned carrying fresh coffee in a thick ceramic mug. Steam curled upward between them. Careful, she said gently. It is hot. Nathaniel looked at the mug but did not touch it. Do you always pay for strangers? Claire gave a tired smile. No. Then why tonight? She rested the coffee pot against her hip and glanced briefly toward the rain outside. Her expression changed again. Softer this time. Sadder. Because 20 years ago, she said quietly, my father forgot his wallet at a truck stop in Indiana during a snowstorm. Nathaniel listened carefully. The waitress there thought he was lying. Humiliated him in front of everybody. Claire swallowed once before continuing. 3 hours later, he fell asleep behind the wheel trying to drive through the storm, angry and exhausted. Silence filled the table. Even the jazz music suddenly felt distant. Claire looked back at him calmly. So now, when people look lost, I try not to make the night worse for them. Nathaniel stared at her without speaking. And for the first time in many years, he genuinely wished he had not lied. Nathaniel lowered his eyes toward the rising steam from the coffee mug, unable to answer right away. Outside, the storm had grown heavier. Wind pushed freezing rain sideways across Michigan Avenue while headlights smeared into pale streaks against the restaurant windows. Inside Blackwood Steakhouse, the dinner crowd had thinned slightly. It was nearing 10 o'clock now, late enough for exhaustion to become visible on people's faces. Claire quietly wiped the edge of the table with a folded cloth, giving him space to think. She had no idea she was standing beside a man worth nearly $4 billion. No idea his name sat on hotel towers from Chicago to Miami. No idea he carried a black card capable of buying the entire restaurant twice over in the inside pocket of the coat hanging beside him. And somehow, that made this moment feel unbearably honest. Nathaniel finally looked up. Your father. He stopped briefly. Did he survive the accident? Claire nodded once. For 3 days. The answer came gently. No bitterness. That was what disturbed him most about her. She spoke about pain the same way she carried plates. Carefully, without asking anyone to notice the weight. Nathaniel leaned back slowly, rubbing a hand across his jaw. You still paid for a stranger after that. Claire gave a faint smile that barely reached her tired eyes. No one should feel small over a mistake. The sentence hit him harder than anything else she had said all night. Because that was exactly what he had spent years doing to people. Measuring them. Watching them fail invisible tests they never agreed to take. Secretly judging every nervous waiter, every impatient cashier, every manager desperate to protect policy over compassion. Somewhere along the line, he stopped looking for goodness and started expecting disappointment instead. Claire moved to refill another table's water glasses nearby. Nathaniel watched her quietly. She never rushed, never performed fake warmth for tips. She treated the college students near the fireplace exactly the same way she treated the older couple drinking 12-year bourbon by the window. Equal eye contact, equal patience, equal dignity. It was almost unsettling in a city where everyone constantly calculated status. A few minutes later, the manager returned carrying the receipt folder. His expression remained tense. Claire, I really cannot approve this adjustment without documentation. Claire sighed softly. Not angry. Just tired. Then take it out of my paycheck. You already covered your mother's medication this week, the manager whispered back. Nathaniel's eyes shifted immediately toward Claire. She froze for the first time all evening. Only slightly. But he noticed. The manager realized too late he had spoken out loud. I am sorry, he muttered awkwardly before stepping away again. Silence settled over the table once more. Claire stared down at the polished wood for a second before forcing a professional smile back into place. Another coffee refill? Nathaniel shook his head slowly. Your mother is sick? Claire folded the cloth carefully between her hands. Early dementia. She tried to say it lightly, but exhaustion slipped through anyway. Some days she remembers me. Some days she thinks I am her sister from 1978. Nathaniel swallowed hard. Something old and buried shifted uncomfortably inside him. His own mother spent the final year of her life in a private care facility overlooking Lake Michigan. 24-hour nurses. Ocean view windows. The best specialists money could buy. And even then, he had barely visited. Too busy. Too important. Too consumed with expansion meetings and acquisition calls to sit beside a woman who no longer recognized him half the time. Claire suddenly glanced toward the coat hanging beside him. Sir. Nathaniel looked up quickly. Your wallet is showing. Time stopped. There it was. The edge of black leather visible inside the coat pocket beneath the warm restaurant lighting. Nathaniel stared at her. Claire stared back calmly. Neither of them moved. Then very softly, almost sadly, she asked, Why would someone pretend to be helpless just to see who stays kind? Nathaniel felt the air leave his lungs slowly. Around them, Blackwood Steakhouse continued moving in soft golden light and distant jazz, but the noise suddenly sounded far away, blurred beneath the weight of Claire's question. She had known. Maybe not from the beginning. Maybe only in the last few minutes. But she had known. And still, she paid the bill. Nathaniel looked toward the edge of his wallet sticking visibly from the coat pocket beside him. Then back at Claire. She stood perfectly still beneath the hanging amber light, one hand resting lightly against the coffee pot, exhaustion visible beneath her calm expression. Not angry. Not dramatic. Somehow that made it worse. I can explain, Nathaniel said quietly. Claire gave the faintest nod. I figured. He swallowed once before speaking again. People act differently when they think you have nothing. Claire pulled out the empty chair across from him and sat down for the first time all evening. Her shift was nearly over now. Most tables had emptied. Snowy rain tapped softly against the windows while kitchen staff cleaned behind swinging doors in the distance. So this was a test? She asked. Nathaniel stared at the untouched coffee between them. I suppose so. Claire studied him silently for a moment. And what exactly were you hoping to prove? Nathaniel laughed once under his breath, but there was no humor in it. That kindness usually has conditions. The words lingered heavily between them. Claire looked toward the front entrance where the last few customers gathered coats and umbrellas beneath the dim lights. You must have met some terrible people. Nathaniel leaned back slowly. I built hotels for 30 years. Luxury changes how people behave around you. He paused briefly. Eventually you stop knowing whether anyone sees you, or just your money. Claire listened quietly without interrupting. Nathaniel noticed that too. Most people rushed to fill silence. She respected it instead. My business partner stole $80 million from me 2 years ago, he admitted softly. My ex-wife sold stories about our marriage to magazines 6 months after the divorce. He shook his head faintly. Every conversation started sounding transactional after that. Claire lowered her eyes toward the table. Pain can make people suspicious. Nathaniel gave a bitter smile. Suspicious? Claire, I spent tonight lying to a woman kind enough to pay my bill out of her grocery money. That finally changed her expression. Not shock. Hurt. Very small. But real. Nathaniel immediately regretted saying it. How did you know about the groceries? She asked quietly. Nathaniel hesitated. The manager mentioned your mother's medication. I guess the rest. Claire looked down at her worn hands resting near the coffee mug. I buy the cheaper cereal now, she admitted softly. And generic coffee. Things add up fast. Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. $200 to him was less than what most executives spent on airport wine between flights. But for her, it meant sacrifices she never complained about. The shame settled deeper into his chest. Claire finally looked back at him. You know what the strange part is? Nathaniel frowned slightly. What? She gave a tired smile. I still do not think you are a bad man. He stared at her in disbelief. After this, bad people do not look ashamed when they hurt someone. Nathaniel could not remember the last time anyone spoke to him with that kind of honesty. No fear. No agenda. Just truth delivered quietly. Outside, a gust of icy wind pushed snow against the restaurant windows while downtown Chicago glowed white beneath the storm. Nathaniel reached slowly into his coat pocket and pulled out the black leather wallet at last. Claire watched silently as he placed it on the table between them. Heavy. Expensive. Embarrassing. Nathaniel looked at it for a long moment before speaking. Do you know who I am? Claire nodded faintly. Nathaniel Reed. He blinked in surprise. You recognized me? About an hour ago. Then why keep treating me the same? Claire stood slowly from the chair and picked up the empty coffee pot again. Her answer came almost in a whisper. Because lonely people are still people. Claire walked toward the service station beneath the dim restaurant lights, leaving Nathaniel alone with the weight of her words. Lonely people are still people. The sentence echoed inside him louder than the jazz drifting through Blackwood Steakhouse. He sat motionless beside the rain-covered window while downtown Chicago shimmered cold and silver outside. For years people described Nathaniel Reed with words like disciplined, strategic, visionary. Lonely never appeared on magazine covers. Yet somehow this exhausted waitress had seen it immediately. Near the kitchen doors, Claire quietly counted receipts while another server stacked wine glasses nearby. Her shoulders looked heavier now that the rush was over. tired in a way sleep probably could not fix anymore. Nathaniel reached for his wallet slowly, opened it, and stared at the rows of black cards resting inside like armor he no longer trusted. One card alone carried a spending limit larger than most families earned in a decade. Yet tonight none of it had protected him from feeling small beneath Claire's honesty. The manager approached again, nervous but polite. "Mr. Reed, I had no idea it was you." Nathaniel barely looked up. That was the point. The manager forced an awkward laugh. "Well, if there is anything we can do to make up for the misunderstanding tonight." Nathaniel finally turned toward him. "You mean after you almost treated me like a criminal over a dinner bill?" The manager's face immediately paled. "Sir, I was only following policy." Nathaniel glanced toward Claire across the room. "Interesting." His voice remained calm, quiet. Somehow that made it sharper. She followed humanity instead. The manager lowered his eyes without answering. A few minutes later, Claire returned carrying her coat folded over one arm. Dark wool, slightly worn near the cuffs. She looked surprised to find Nathaniel still sitting there. "You are still here?" Nathaniel stood slowly for the first time since dinner ended. At 6'2", he carried the quiet presence of someone used to command. But tonight something softer sat behind his tired blue eyes. "I think I owe you more than an apology." Claire slipped her arms into the coat calmly. "You already paid the bill." "That is not what I meant." Silence lingered between them while snow mixed with rain outside the tall windows. Most of the lights downtown had dimmed now. Midnight approached quietly over the city. Nathaniel reached into his wallet and pulled out several crisp $100 bills. Claire immediately shook her head before he could speak. "No. Claire, no." Her voice remained gentle but firm. "If you hand me money right now, you are going to ruin the only honest conversation you have probably had in years." Nathaniel froze. Again, she saw straight through him. He slowly lowered the cash back into the wallet. Claire softened slightly after a moment. "You do not have to fix every uncomfortable feeling with money." Nathaniel looked down briefly. "That may be the only skill I practiced long enough to master." Claire gave a small tired smile. "That sounds exhausting." He almost laughed then. Almost. Instead, he looked toward the empty tables surrounding them. White tablecloths. Half-burned candles. Expensive silence. "Do you know something strange?" he asked quietly. Claire waited. Tonight was supposed to confirm everything I already believed about people. And did it? Nathaniel looked directly at her. "No." The answer came instantly this time. "Honest." Claire studied him carefully for a second before walking toward the front entrance. Nathaniel followed beside her slowly. Outside, icy wind swept snow along the sidewalk while the city glowed pale beneath streetlights. A Blacktown car finally turned the corner toward the restaurant entrance. His driver. Late. Nathaniel stopped beneath the awning and looked back at Claire one more time. "Why did you never expose me?" Claire adjusted her coat against the cold. "Because embarrassed people become defensive." She paused briefly. "And I think life already humbled you long before tonight did." Nathaniel stood speechless as snow drifted silently between them. The Blacktown car idled quietly beneath the falling snow while Nathaniel stood under the restaurant awning unable to move. Claire's words lingered in the freezing air between them. "Life already humbled you long before tonight did." Most people around him spent years trying to impress him. Investors quoted his interviews. Executives rehearsed conversations before entering his office. Strangers smiled too quickly once they recognized his face. But Claire Whitmore had done something far more dangerous. She told him the truth without trying to gain anything from it. The driver stepped out, holding a large umbrella against the storm. "Mr. Reed, I apologize for the delay. Lakeshore Drive is nearly frozen over." Nathaniel barely acknowledged him. His attention remained fixed on Claire standing beneath the warm glow of the restaurant entrance, snow collecting lightly in her dark hair. She looked tired, really tired now. The kind of exhaustion that settled into someone's bones after years of surviving instead of living. Nathaniel suddenly realized he did not want this night to end yet. "Claire." She looked up slowly. "Yes." Nathaniel hesitated longer than expected. Strange. Billion-dollar negotiations never made him nervous. Yet asking one exhausted waitress a simple question suddenly felt complicated. "Would you let me drive you home?" Claire blinked once, surprised. Then she smiled softly and shook her head. "That is kind, but no." Nathaniel frowned slightly. "Because I lied?" "Partly." Her honesty almost made him smile. and partly because people say emotional things after difficult nights. Tomorrow usually changes them back. The sentence landed quietly, not cynical, experienced. Nathaniel glanced toward the snowy streets stretching beyond downtown Chicago. Empty sidewalks, red brake lights glowing through the storm. You really believe people do not change? Claire pulled her coat tighter against the wind. I think pain changes people fast. She paused briefly. Healing changes them slowly. Nathaniel stared at her for a moment without speaking. Then something unexpected happened. The young host from earlier pushed through the restaurant doors holding a cell phone. His face looked pale beneath the entrance lights. Claire, he said carefully. The nursing home called again. Her entire expression changed instantly. Fear. Not dramatic. Quiet. Deep. The kind that appears when someone is already carrying too much. Claire grabbed the phone quickly. Hello. Nathaniel watched her face lose color while snow drifted silently around them. I understand, she whispered into the phone. Did she fall? A pause. Her eyes closed briefly. No, I can come tonight. Nathaniel looked away respectfully, but he could still hear fragments carried softly through. The freezing wind. Confusion. Wandering episode. Asking for someone who died years ago. Claire finally lowered the phone slowly, pressing trembling fingers against her forehead. Is your mother okay? Nathaniel asked gently. Claire nodded automatically, but the movement looked forced. She left the memory care wing during dinner and tried walking outside. Nathaniel felt something tighten painfully in his chest. In this weather? Claire gave a weak laugh, filled with exhaustion. She thought she was 23 again and trying to catch a train to Milwaukee. Snow continued falling harder now, coating the sidewalks in white. Nathaniel looked toward the black town car idling beside them. Heated seats. Professional driver. Warmth. Stability. Then he looked back at Claire standing alone in the storm, trying to hold herself together with pure discipline. Get in the car, he said quietly. Claire shook her head immediately. Nathaniel, this is not charity. His voice remained calm. Honest. It is a ride through dangerous weather for someone who once paid a stranger's dinner bill without asking his name. Claire looked at him for a long moment while icy wind swept snow between them. Then finally, slowly, some of the guarded tension left her face. Not trust completely, just enough. She nodded once, and for the first time that entire night, Nathaniel Reed felt something warmer than shame beginning to return to his life. The inside of the town car smelled faintly of leather and cedar as Chicago disappeared behind curtains of snow outside the windows. Claire sat quietly in the back seat beside Nathaniel, her gloved hands folded tightly in her lap, while streetlights slid across her tired face in soft gold flashes. Neither of them spoke for the first few minutes. The silence no longer felt uncomfortable now, just heavy with things both of them were still trying to understand. Nathaniel watched the city pass slowly outside. Closed flower stands. Nearly empty sidewalks. A homeless man pulling cardboard tighter around himself beneath an underpass. Snow covering everything equally. Wealth. Loneliness. Exhaustion. The storm did not care who owned skyscrapers and who worked double shifts. She used to love winter, Claire said suddenly, still looking out the window. Nathaniel turned toward her quietly. Your mother? Claire nodded faintly. Every December, she baked cinnamon bread at 4 in the morning and played old Frank Sinatra records too loud. A small smile crossed her face before fading again. Now she forgets where her own room is. Nathaniel listened carefully. He noticed how she spoke about her mother with patience instead of resentment, as if grief had become something gentle inside her instead of bitter. He admired that more than he could explain. My mother hated winter, Nathaniel admitted after a moment. Claire glanced toward him. Really? He nodded once. Said Chicago cold made people emotionally distant. Claire gave the faintest laugh. She was probably right. Nathaniel smiled slightly for the first time that night. A real smile. Small. Unpracticed. It disappeared almost immediately when his phone suddenly vibrated in his coat pocket. He glanced at the screen. 3 missed calls from his chief financial officer. 2 emails marked urgent. A message about a hotel acquisition in Denver. Normally, he would have answered instantly. Tonight, he simply locked the screen again. Claire noticed. Big emergency? She asked softly. Nathaniel looked down at the dark phone in his hand. Probably. But he stared out at the snowy streets again. For once, I do not think it matters more than where I am right now. Claire looked at him carefully after that. Not impressed. Not charmed. Just thoughtful. The car finally turned into the circular driveway of Lakeside Memory Care, a quiet brick building overlooking the frozen edge of Lake Michigan. Warm yellow lights glowed behind wide windows, while snow collected heavily along the sidewalks. Nathaniel stepped out first, holding the umbrella over Claire as icy wind swept across the parking lot. She looked surprised by the gesture, but said nothing. Inside, the nursing home smelled faintly of tea and antiseptic. Soft piano music played somewhere down the hallway. An older nurse looked up from the front desk with visible relief when Claire entered. She finally fell asleep about 20 minutes ago, the nurse whispered gently. Claire closed her eyes briefly in relief. Nathaniel stood back respectfully near the entrance while Claire spoke quietly with the staff. He watched the way everyone greeted her warmly. Not because she was wealthy, not because she carried influence, because she showed up. Consistently, kindly. That realization struck him harder than expected. For years, Nathaniel donated millions to hospitals, scholarships, charities. His name engraved on polished marble walls across the country. Yet standing here tonight, watching Claire tuck a loose blanket around her sleeping mother through a half-open doorway, he suddenly understood the difference between generosity and presence. One cost money, the other cost time. Claire stepped quietly back into the hallway a few moments later, brushing snowmelt from her coat sleeve. "Thank you for driving me," she whispered. Nathaniel looked through the doorway toward the elderly woman sleeping peacefully beneath soft blue blankets. "Does she know you come every night?" Claire smiled sadly. "Some nights she thinks I am a nurse." Nathaniel felt his chest tighten again. Claire leaned against the hallway wall for a second, exhausted beyond words now. Then softly, almost teasing, she asked, "So tell me honestly, Mr. Reed, after all your little experiments, did pretending to be poor actually teach you anything?" Nathaniel looked at her for a long moment beneath the quiet nursing home lights. Then finally, he answered with complete honesty. "Yes." Claire raised an eyebrow slightly. Nathaniel's voice dropped almost to a whisper. "It taught me that the richest person I met tonight was the waitress who paid my bill." 2 weeks later, the storm was gone. Morning sunlight spilled across downtown Chicago in pale gold reflections, while early traffic rolled slowly beneath clear winter skies. Inside Blackwood Steakhouse, the atmosphere felt completely different from that snowy night. No jazz, no candlelight, just quiet morning preparation before lunch service. Coffee machines hummed softly. Silverware clinked against folded napkins. Claire Whitmore stood near the front windows wiping down tables. Beneath natural daylight, her dark blonde hair loosely pinned back as sunlight warmed the side of her face. She looked tired still, but lighter somehow, like someone who survived another difficult week and kept moving anyway. The front door opened quietly behind her. Claire glanced up automatically, then froze for half a second. Nathaniel Reed stood near the entrance wearing a dark wool coat and simple gray scarf, snow-free for once, no assistants beside him, no luxury performance surrounding him. Just one man carrying something small beneath his arm. Claire set down the towel slowly. "You came back." Nathaniel gave a faint smile. "I said I would." The morning hostess looked up from the reservation stand, immediately recognizing him from financial magazines. Her eyes widened slightly, but Nathaniel ignored the attention completely. His focus stayed on Claire, always calmer than he remembered. "Your mother?" he asked gently. Claire nodded once. "Good morning yesterday. Difficult night before that." Nathaniel understood more now about how exhausting hope could become. He stepped closer and placed a plain white envelope carefully on the table beside her. Claire looked down at it immediately. "Nathaniel, it is not charity." His voice stayed soft but firm. "Read the card first." Claire opened the envelope slowly beneath the morning sunlight. Inside was a handwritten note resting beside a cashier's check made out anonymously to Lakeside Memory Care. Enough to cover nearly 2 years of specialized treatment. Claire's breath caught softly, but Nathaniel kept speaking before she could refuse. No cameras, no foundation press release, no tax write-off announcement. He paused briefly. "Just help." Claire unfolded the handwritten card next. The words were simple. "Thank you for reminding me that dignity is not something money buys. It is something kindness gives away for free." Claire stared at the note silently while the restaurant noises faded into the background around them. Nathaniel noticed her eyes growing glassy in the morning light, though she quickly looked away before tears could fully form. "You did not have to do this," she whispered. Nathaniel looked out. The front windows toward the city waking up outside. I know. Then he smiled faintly. That is probably why it finally means something. Claire closed the envelope slowly against her chest. Neither of them spoke for a moment. They did not need to. Some conversations become too honest for many words. The hostess suddenly approached nervously. Mr. Reed, your driver is waiting outside. Nathaniel nodded once, but did not move immediately. Instead, he looked back at Claire one last time. You were right, you know. Claire tilted her head slightly. About what? Nathaniel smiled quietly. Money hides people sometimes. Claire laughed softly under her breath. The first real laugh he had heard from her. Warm. Human. Real. Nathaniel turned toward the door, then paused beneath the sunlight spilling across the restaurant floor. Take care of yourself too, Claire. You too, Nathaniel. He stepped outside into the bright Chicago morning, while Claire remained near the window, holding the envelope carefully in both hands. For the first time in years, Nathaniel Reed did not feel powerful walking back toward his car. He felt human, and somehow, that mattered more. Maybe the quietest people really do teach the loudest lessons. If this story moved you, tell us what you would have done in Claire's place, and whether kindness still matters in a world where people judge each other so quickly. Share your thoughts and your own story below. Sometimes the smallest moments change a life forever.